Today I would like to go into the image of God, because what really is the image of God? If we look here in our church, we have all kinds of faces, shapes, ages. We have someone here created in the image of God. We have little Sasha created in the image of God. We have Jim Schaefer created in the very image of God. We have Eric Salazar created in God's image. We have Gandhi, who was created in God's image. We have Donald Trump in the image of God. We have Joseph Stalin created in the image of God. We have Adolf Hitler created in the image of God. All these people created in God's image, and yet so many different results. Interestingly enough, Brother Bear said that we have had the choice to be here this day. We had the choice to be here in church today. But we did not have the choice the day we were created. We were created in God's image. So what does that mean? Because I think it's important for understanding what we believe. It goes into everything from caring for the sick and the dying, to abortion, to what we should do today in our daily lives to truly live in the image of God. And we were all created in that image. So let's go to the very beginning. Today's topic will be primarily in the Old Testament, and then I will have a second follow-up sermon later on talking about the image of God in the New Testament, which has a lot of implications for us today. But let us open our Bibles to Genesis 1, Genesis 1, 26 through 28. And it involves our key text that we read earlier. And it says here, "Then God said, 'Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let him have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth.' So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. And God blessed them and said to them, 'Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the heavens, over everything that moves on the earth.'" So that's Genesis 1. This happens on day 6. God creates humankind in his image. Around the same time, he creates some of the animals. But as we know, our creation as humans was different. It was very, very unique. Ellen White in Patriarchs and Prophets, page 45, had some interesting insight, which in her time was just taking off, and now has really pervaded or gone throughout all of society with regard to humankind and them being created in the image of God. And like I said, this has implications all the way through evolution, which we will not have an evolution versus creation talk today, but I still think it's important that we learn this. She says that God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over all the earth." So God created man in his own image. Male and female he created them. Here is clearly set forth the origin of the human race, and the divine record is so plainly stated that there is no occasion for erroneous conclusions. God created man in his own image. Here is no mystery. There is no ground for the supposition that man was evolved by slow degrees of development from the lower forms of animal or vegetable life. Thus, teaching lowers the great work of the Creator to the level of man's narrow earthly conceptions. Men are so intent upon excluding God from the sovereignty of the universe that they degrade man and defraud him of the dignity of his origin. He who set the starry worlds on high and tinted with delicate skills the flowers of the field, who filled the earth and the heavens with wonders of his power, when he came to crown his glorious work, to place one in the midst to stand as ruler of the fair earth, did not fail to create a being worthy of the hand that gave him life. The genealogy of our race, as given by inspiration, traces back to its origin. not a line of developing germs and mollusks and quadrupeds, but to the Creator. Though formed from the dust, Adam was the Son of God. I found that a very powerful statement, something at that time where Darwinism was just taking off. And now here we are many years later, and we see the result. I think many times, we do not want to be part of the image of God. We want to be of our own image. And the sanctity of life and the ways we view ourselves have all changed since this early time. Because Adam was the Son of God, we all are sons of God in our creation. And we should always remember that. So what is the image? What is the image of God? There are a couple more verses I'd like us to read. Let's go to Genesis 5, 1 through 3. Genesis 5, 1 to 3. This is talking about the second generation, the sons of Adam. And it says here, this is the book of the generations of Adam. When God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. Male and female, he created them. He blessed them and named them man. When they were created, Adam had lived 130 years. He fathered a son in his own likeness after his image and named him Seth. So what? It says here that God created Adam in the image of God. So Adam bore that image, and then what happens later? Adam has a son who is in his own likeness, which is the likeness received from God. So this indicates that the image is passed down. It's passed down all the way to us. If we go one more verse, let's read from Genesis 9. Genesis 9:6. This is the commission that God gives humanity after the flood. Genesis 9:6, it talks about murder, taking of human life. And it says here, whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed, for God made man in his own image. So even after the flood, even after the sin and the destruction of the flood, humans were still in the image of God. And what does that tell me today? That we are all still in the image of God. So what is the image? I'd like to go through some preliminary guidelines for us to think about this. Because I've heard things in the past. Oh, man was made in the image of God, but Eve was taken from the rib. She wasn't made in the image of God. But from these Bible verses, it's clear that he created he them in the image of God. So both male and female. It's not a gender. It's not a gender. God is not a male or a female. Both man and woman are the image of God. This image is very unique. It's applied only to humans. And in some ways, humans are a copy. How are they a copy? They're a copy of the original. Nothing in any of these texts suggests that there is a slow process to become the image of God. There is no potential image. By being human, you are the image. So what does that mean? That means that it doesn't matter if you're 2 cells into the process after conception or 4 cells. You're not a potential image of God. You are the image of God. There's no way that this can be gained, and there's no way that this can be lost. You were created in God's image. So this is important for abortion. Because people say, when does human life become human life? When is it? How do you know? Humanity simply possesses it. Also, by saying it cannot be lost, I remember I had a patient, a traumatic brain injury patient. Because what could we say is the image? You could say it's intelligence, communication, the ability to think critically. A traumatic brain injury patient, he was my age. He was driving fast with his motorcycle and crashed. And he looked totally normal, sitting in the ICU bed, sitting there. And good morning, how are you doing? Oh, good morning, and he's smiling at me. Good morning. How are you doing? Oh, great, great. But that's about as far as you could get with him. Are you hungry? Oh, yes, yes. Has he lost the image? That is him the rest of his life. His brain is messed up. His capacity is smiling. He smiles. He looks around. He says he's hungry or thirsty, and that's about it. Has he lost the image? Or does he still have something that makes him valuable in God's eyes? These are important things because what is happening in society around us? Life can be discarded because we're like any other animal. You can discard the life that's in the womb. You can discard the life that's no longer, relevant in society. He's lost his brain power. This guy's a traumatic brain injury. Why should we even care for him? Maybe we should just terminate his life. Now, that's how society is becoming. Or maybe, you have a Down syndrome child. Do they have any value to them? So this is important. This cannot be gained, it cannot be lost. In some way, when we have our children, when little Sasha was born, something passed from Valerie and Alex into him that counts as the image of God, and he has it from the very moment of conception. Same with little Ellie. Additionally, from these three verses that we read, or these three texts, humanity who bears the image, they have a job. They have a job to rule over creation. And then also, it was, let us make man in our own image. There was plurality there. Some feel that it's God talking to his heavenly council. Some feel that it's God talking to himself, because it is the early view of the Godhead, where they are discussing among themselves, God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, let us create a humankind like us. So, from what we have read here, I can condense it down to three things that we should think when we think about bearing the image of God. It makes humankind distinct among everything else that God created in the first and the 7 days of creation. Every human member bears this equally. Like I said, from Adolf Hitler was created in God's image, I was created in God's image. This is something that he gave to every one of us. It makes us all equally valuable, all the way from the homeless person to the leader of a country. Equally valuable in God's eyes. And it's something that is shared with God himself when he created us. So what is the image not? Because I brought up some of this a little bit. I hinted at it. And many times growing up I heard, well, to be in the image of God, you have to have intelligence. You have to be rational. You have to have emotions. You have to know when to be sad, happy, or maybe you have to have the ability to pray to God and communicate with God. You need to have free will. I have the choice. I can choose to do right and wrong. I need a sense of morality to have the image of God. But I'd like to bring up to all of you today that these things that we discuss here are not necessarily the image of God, because not everyone has all of these things. When does little Sasha have the ability to be rational, or little Ellie? When do they have the ability to pray to God? When do they have a sense of morality? If you base your belief on what the image of God is, you suddenly limit yourself to different parts. You suddenly take out different members of society based off of mental retardation or a stroke. So it's important that we realize that it's something deeper than what we normally think makes us unique. So like I said, not all of these things are unique to human beings. I can see when I tell my dog, Shadow, don't do that. I can see her thinking. I can see her using her free will. Will I obey my master or will I not? Does that make her have something special that God has given her? No. Many animals can communicate with each other and with human beings, but they are not necessarily what we are. So I'd like to propose to everybody today that the image of God is something that can actually be discovered in the grammar of how Genesis 1:26 was written, and how people, as they're looking into ancient Hebrew, they're thinking that maybe this is what the writer was trying to mean in the very beginning. It says here in Genesis 1:26, then God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness. And the word in is what's important there. The word in. So in is a preposition. And I'm going to put it in a couple sentences, and you'll see that in can mean different things in the English language, much less the Hebrew language. So, if Alina tells me, put the dishes in the sink, what does in signify? A location. It's used to signify I need to put something in a location. I'm putting the dishes in the sink. If I say, I wrote it in pencil, I signed the document in pencil, it says a source or an instrumentality, right? In is what I used to do what I did. If I say Ellie broke the plate in pieces, it shows a result of something. If I tell Brother Schaefer, tell him this in reply, this is a purpose. So this is the same word used in different contexts in a sentence. If I say I work in medicine, what does that mean? It's a function, it's a capacity. If I work in billing, I work, or I could say I work in Denver, that's a location. So depending on a sentence, in has different meanings. So what many people are thinking of is the image of God in the context of the sentence. In is a function. In is a function in the fact that they say that the preposition in should be an understood meaning of as or in capacity of. Humanity was created as the image of God. The concept can be conveyed if we think of the image as a verb. Humans are created to be God's imagers. They function in the capacity of God's representatives. The image of God is not a quality within human beings, it is what humans are. So it's a job description. It's like I work in medicine. That's my job description. We are to work as imagers of God, as representatives of God. And how does that tie in? How does that tie in with the Great Commission? The first Great Commission. Be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth. There is a charge by humanity to care for the earth, to bring the earth up as representatives of God here on this earth. That was our initial plan. It says here, and I got this from the Lexham Bible Dictionary, being created as God's imagers means we are His representatives on earth. The only qualification for this is that we are human. This is why the creation of humankind as God's image in Genesis 1:26 through 27 is immediately followed by the so-called dominion mandate of Genesis 1:28. Humanity is tasked with stewarding God's creation as though God were physically present to undertake the duty Himself. So it's very interesting because when you look at the implications of this, you look at, because they continue on to say here, you look at Genesis 9 where it says, you shall not kill a human being, because if you kill a human being, your blood shall be shed because all men were created in the image of God. It's tantamount to actually killing the closest representative of God. If you look at Matthew 25:40, what does that say? If you have done it unto the least of these my brothers, you have done it unto me. You have actually done it to God. Because we were made in His image, we are His representatives. And when we act in ways against other people that are un-Christ-like, we are actually shaming and acting against God Himself. It's also very interesting because you look in the Ten Commandments, you shall not create any image, any graven image. Why? Because God has already made an image, a representative of Him in humanity. So very interesting on how this comes to being. Ellen White has some very nice comments on the image of God. Education, page 15. When Adam came from the Creator's hand, he bore in his physical, mental, and spiritual nature a likeness of his Maker. God created man in His own image, and it was His purpose that the longer man lived, the more fully he should reveal this image, the more fully reflect the glory of the Creator. All of his faculties were capable of development, their capacity and vigor continually to increase. Vast was the scope offered in their exercise, glorious the field of their research, to their research. The mysteries of the visible universe, the wonders of Him which is perfect in knowledge, invited man's study face to face, heart to heart. Communion with his Maker was his high privilege. Had he remained loyal to God, all this would have been his forever. Through eternal ages, he would have continued to gain new treasures of knowledge, to discover fresh springs of happiness, and to obtain a clearer yet clearer conceptions of his wisdom, the power and the love of God. More and more fully would he have fulfilled the object of creation. More and more fully would he have reflected the Creator's glory. So that is what we could have had. We were created in His image, but not only that, we were made to become more and more like Him. It was not necessarily a physical thing or a mental thing, but it was a job description that He put us here on earth to do, to be an imager, to be a representative of God on this earth. And brothers and sisters, isn't that what we are called to do today? To be a royal priesthood? Do you think that this has changed for us today? Everyone has a baseline amount of it, but that has not changed for us today. We all have an intrinsic value. So how has humankind maintained this great image of God? It's ironic as we turn to Genesis 3:5. To me, the irony was real. I wasn't going to put this in my sermon. But what does the serpent say to the woman? For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God. The King James says, be as gods, knowing good and evil. So we trade the image of God, the direct image that He created us in. We trade it for some other, some facade, some false image. We decide that, you know what, we want something better than what God has made us in, than what He has created us as. Ellen White says in Education, page 15 and 16, she says that through sin, the divine likeness was marred and well nigh obliterated. Man's physical powers were weakened, his mental capacity was lessened, his spiritual vision dimmed, he had become subject to death, yet the race was not left without hope. By infinite love and mercy, the plan of salvation had been devised, and a life of probation was granted to restore man in the image of his Maker, to bring him back to perfection, to the perfection he was created in. This was to be the work of redemption. This is the object of education and the great object of life. So this is something that was planned when? From the foundations, from the beginning of the world, from the beginning of time, that there would be someone who would come and rescue the lost image that we have destroyed by obeying and following Satan's first lie. You know, it's probably Satan's first lie to humanity, but he made many other lies previously to those in heaven. It was his first to humanity. And we happily took it. Happily. We gave up the best, the perfect creation that we were made in, for something that we perceived would be better. Isn't that something we always do? You know, it's always greener. We have the same problem now. It's always better in the neighbor's backyard. It's always better doing something else. When God has a plan for us, we happily give it up. Continuing on Ellen White's comments on what we have done to God's image. Education, page 76. So evil unrestrained grew stronger, and while the appreciation and desire for good diminished, men lost the image of God and received the impress of a demoniacal power by which they were controlled. The whole world was becoming a sink of corruption. There was but one hope for the human race, that into this mass of discordant, corrupting elements might be cast a new leaven. You know, she brings up very, very good comments on the image, and then an impress, and then we'll go into a little bit further the coin. And here I have a coin that was here in Christ's day. Here you have the imprint of Caesar. And she says here earlier, she says that there's an impress of a demoniacal power. Those are actually coins from, I think, the Masons, the Freemasons, or something like that, where there is an imprinting. There is an imprinting on a coin. We were made with the image of God imprinted on us. But you know what? As time has gone on and we have fallen for the lie, we are allowing someone else to imprint their image on us. And 6,000 years have gone by and we've allowed ourselves to be changed. So she says here, men lost the image of God. Does she really mean that? It's gone? There's no hope? It's over? Christ's Object Lessons 194, the lost coin. The coin, though lying among the dust and rubbish, is a piece of silver still. So it has intrinsic value, right? Just the coin itself, just the silver, it has some value, right? Its owner seeks it because of its value. So every soul, however degraded by sin, is in God's sight accounted precious. It's like I said, even Hitler himself, he was precious. Even Stalin, even anyone, those suffering with drug addiction, those suffering with all kinds of problems, doesn't matter how messed up our life is, we still have an intrinsic value in God's eyes because He created us. He had a plan for us. As the coin bears the image and superscription of the reigning power, as in this case Caesar, in our case God, so man at his creation bore the image and superscription of God. Though now marred and dim through the influence of sin, the traces of this inscription remains entraced on the soul. God desires to recover that soul and to retrace upon it His own image in the righteousness and holiness of Christ. So what does that mean for us today? Here we are 6,000 years removed. Almost all of us, probably, I'd say all of us, maybe have nearly effaced the image of God. But you know what? There's something still there in everybody in this world, because we came from our Creator. And it doesn't matter how near effaced it is, there is still a value in God's heart for us that He came and He offered His only begotten Son to die on the cross for us. And for us as Christians, as Seventh-day Adventists, what do we seek to be? We seek to bear the image the way God. We seek to be an imager the way God originally designed us to be, correct? We all want to go back to Eden. We all want to go back to that state. How should we view each other? We should view each other, everyone we meet, as though they may be a marred coin, they still have the image of God entraced on their soul. And they have an intrinsic value. So my wish and prayer for us all, before I go into the second part of the image of God in the New Testament, which will be restoring the defaced coin, is that we look at our lives and see that no matter where we are, no matter what we have done, we may be living a life of failure, a life of, a life that we thought we should have been living better, and now the years have gone by, and maybe it's too late. Maybe it's too late. Maybe you feel like the coin has been totally effaced, and there's no way I could be an imager of God, following the verb that He wants me to be, a representative of Him here on earth. The reality is there's still much hope. There's much hope for us, and there's much hope for those around us, for those we come into contact with, for those we may meet each and every day. They still have that value. Everybody, from Stalin to me, everybody has that value. So my wish and prayer for all of us is that we cogitate and think on the image He has put in us. And I encourage each and every one of us to look around and see the defaced coins around us that need to be refaced with the image of God.